Okay. Thank you, successor. More than we normally have about the only, and we hope you will be curious enough to join us in the future. Dr. Yomi, you can either be there 5:30 in the morning upstairs, you can be at home on Zoom, or you can watch it during the day on YouTube. So you have all these options. And we thank Rabbi Eli Smith for having taught us so along the thing. She lives well. Right now we're learning, we're finishing this new one, we're finishing Avodah Zara, and we were learning it for Shleimer, for Rabbi Smith's father, his name is Rabbi Smith.
Naphtali.
No,
Miriam.
okay, and also for Naftali, and Aaron and Moshe and Samuel Berkshire. He's getting a whole before Shleimer. We really got the miracle. Also, this week in 3 days, I have your side of my father who passed away when I was 11, and I'm turning 73, so it's been a long time. So, and this was my father. So now let's get going. Okay, Avodah Zara, I have to admit, has been one of the most unbelievable Gemaras we world. First of all, you know, we have this thing by Jews that when an old person comes to you, especially if you're a younger person, but at any age, he wants to know, you know, what you're learning. They say this, what are you holding? You know, the hot stuff, you know, and this has always been very embarrassing here, this Maseches. You say, you know, where you holding, what you're holding, you say, I'm holding Avodah Zara. You know, it's just saying I'm holding Avodah Zara itself stands like, looking at Avodah Zara. And what do we learn? We learn about all situations involved where what happens if you come across an idol worshipper's idol? Not the idol, but actually the demon of the place where people worship. How do you recognize it? They send the stones. And what about how did they worship it? Did they throw stones at it? Did they defecate on it? What kind of things? What if the idol worshiper, one type of idol, did his worshiping in another type? It goes into all these variations on the thing, most of which don't even concern us nowadays because basically, you know, they need to do with idol worship. But what did the worshipers around nowadays? But what's really interesting, which we learned, at least I learned in detail why Rabbi Smith was walking doing Eretz Yisrael. And I thank him for the opportunity for letting me take over his share because it really takes a lot of work, even if no one is listening oh yeah, you were listening not too long. And the head of the audience, I'm looking at some great person. All right. Well, I must admit, Hilo, where's Hilo? Hilo was the most tremendous help. But anyway, we concentrate mostly on cases that have to do with Yayin Nesach. Now, what's Yayin Nesach? Yayin Nesach is wine that was going to be used for libations for Avodah Zara. What does that mean? It means that it's an idol worshiper. We come across one, he slipped wine with his hand, and what was his intention? To then take that wine and pour it as a libation on the idol altar where he would pray. Now, even if he didn't do that yet, the moment he would go and stick his hands in, you know, kind of move it around, or the moment we were suspect that he could have had the opportunity to do that, that wine became prohibited. And that's what we call Yayin Nesach. Now, nowadays, we don't even come across this. So when we were first learning this, everyone was thinking about Stam Gainum, or what if a non-Jew sees the wine, they're thinking about Yayin Bushel, cooked wine, or they're thinking about when we cover up the wines, you know, and Kiddushin, we have these zipper covers. wants. This has nothing to do anything. Remember, the Gemara was canonized in the year 500 of the Common Era. All right. These other things which we talk about, what I just mentioned, that didn't happen until, I don't know, 1,000 years later or whatever. All right, or 100 at least. I mean, that's modern day further rabbinic protections and fences to keep us away from drinking wine with non-Jews. Well, we learned that that had to do with so the other thing in the last few weeks is the excessive with several situations of sitting down with women of every view. And because this is a family share, I had to use euphemisms for these women. So when I get to share, I used dressmakers. Because it turned out in England, those type of women that in the olden days of dressmakers. It also turns out that in Italy in the olden days, they were called hairdressers. So I want to know, when I refer to hairdressers or dressmakers, I'm referring to women we should not be hanging out with. All right, the women who are doing business on the other side of the bar. It's not like the bartenders. You sit down to have a drink, and the woman that's at the bar. All right, we know that. That's why I'm saying all this. So the point is that I was amazed at how many cases we have written about this. The Gemara was very much aware of reality and very much aware of temptation. But what's interesting, all these cases, we're really not worried about these women. We're worried about the IRS stuff. It seems the Jews were more concerned that their wine should not become wine to be used by idolaters than anything else. So these are the cases that involves a fruit person sitting at the table and there's a dressmaker at the table. When he gets up, what's the Gemara then discussed? When he comes back, all that wine that was open in flasks, they're all considered Dionysic, they're considered wines for libation, and you can't touch those wines. So it's really amazing how when they bring these situations, we're not even interested in this. We're righteous Jews. But what we are interested in is our wine is so holy because we use the holy purposes. It should not be tampered by these idol worshippers. And there's several cases brought there, and we'll come to an ending here. But before we come to the ending, a few pages or a page or two before the end, they talk about a Rav that comes to a spa and he's visiting, I don't know, a Roman officer, whoever, non-Jewish officer of the land there. And he's sitting in the spa, a hot dog from a quick dunk in the mikvah, and he's just soaking it up with rose petals all over the place. All right. And he's surrounded by women who are these hairdressers or dressmakers. So imagine the scene. If you can't imagine the scene, don't imagine the scene. All right. So what does this guy say to the rabbi? He said, isn't this heaven? What do you think of my heaven? And what does the rabbi, I forget the rabbi's name, it was a few pages ago, he says, this isn't. You have no idea what heaven is. So he says, why isn't this heaven? He goes, you think this is heaven? You know what? You still have the fear of the general, whoever it is, above you. At any moment, he can call you, he can check you, he can do anything to you. He says, we don't have that fear. In our heaven, we're going to be on direct one-to-one with our Ribono Shel Olam. We're not going to worry about, being with him then. And he kind of laughs at him. And just at that moment, after the rabbi says this statement, in walks a messenger from the government and says to this guy, this non-Jew who's enjoying this rose petal there, he says, quick, you're being called by the governor or whoever it is. It's like, whoa, it just came out of the words, repeats addiction, right out of his mouth, and he's brought there. All right. and he has to go. So on his way out, he says to this Rav, he says, you know what? Anyone who's ever going to curse you, their eyes should pop out of their head. And it sounds like it's supposed so the bottom line is that and at that moment, his eyes popped out. So what might have sounded like a blessing was actually a curse. It shows you the holiness of this one. So now let's finish this Gemara because it's interesting. We were learning about Kashrut and the way Kabbalah, although how something becomes kosher, how we unkosher, whether it just has to be washed, whether it has to be cooked, boiled and go over the lip. All right. So now we talk about knives. Because in those days, agricultural knife, these knives didn't have wooden handles. It was just an all metal knife. They would stick the knife 10 times into the ground. All right, and that's how to do it. So get the case now. Yihadama Yehuda Avate Bartovi. As was the case in this incident involving my Yehuda and Bati Bartovi. That was the thing. Having just they come to Shabbat Malka. They were sitting in front of the king of Shapur. Aitulakame Esroga. And Esrog was brought in front of the king. Obviously, this is for eating, it's not doing sukkah. Because what happens to the Esrog, you don't know what happens. So this king Shapur took his knife, which obviously was a trade knife, and cut off a piece of, you ever see Europeans, how they would eat like apple, they take their knife, they cut a thing, and they take a bite, cut another piece of the apple, eat like that, eating with a knife. No fork, eating with the knife. Pasuk achal, that's how I grew up, seeing that in my life. So he take a slice, a piece of the yeshog, and he ate it. Pasuk v'haba leila v'atei v'atovi, and then he took another slice, and he gave it to this person, Bate Bartuvi. Now, whether or not Bati Bartuve was a full-fledged Jew or he was an Eved Knani, that it'll comment within, actually, not in the Gemara here, but in the commentary, all right? But he gave him a BC. He then, after he did that, took this knife and thrust it 10 times into the ground. So it appeared he was kashering the knife. And then after he kashered it, this is not Jew, he knows our lessons. So after he kashered the knife, he then sliced a piece of his esrog and he handed it to Mar Yehuda. Now again, Daf Yomi is not a halacha class. You don't say me, an esrog, it's like a lemon, it's like an onion, it's sharp, maybe that's not enough passion, maybe I have to boil it. But as far as this situation is concerned, we're dealing with those people who hold 10 slices on this nut. But what did he do here? He did it for this Rav Yehuda, but he didn't do that costing process for this whatever the previous person. Who he says, and this person, meaning Bati Bartuvi, he's talking in the third person, he's talking about himself. He says, I'm not an Israelite. Right? He says that you have no concern about serving him, meaning actually himself, food cut with a non-kosher knife. He was a little bit taken aback. So King Shapur responded to Bati regarding the matter that with Mar Yehuda, I'm aware that he is a scrupulous person, meaning Mar Yehuda, and will not eat the forbidden thing. Marlo He says, but regarding this person, Bati Bartovi, who he was talking to you directly, I'm unaware. Because I'm away, it called my Avodah. Others say, I love the sending, he's one thing. Others say, King Shapha told Bati Bahubi, I know what you did last. Woo! What an ending. And what he's referring to is that he knows he was at one of these places last night where they brought in Persian dressmaking. All right? And he knows that Mar Yehuda said, get out of here, I don't want to let you do it. But this guy didn't send them away. And therefore, he basically questions his propriety, etc. And therefore, he didn't go and cut his knife for him. So it ends on this note that's again so where I know what he was, but yet it's a Lashon Nakiya. It doesn't say that he did anything bad. I know what you did last. I know what you. So this whole Gemara in general speaks in euphemisms, teaches halachas, but teaches of the halach of Jews in general, how holy we were and how we handle things. Phenomenal Gemara. I highly recommend. When I was a child, when I wrote a book, I had to write a book report. At the end, it was always the same sentence. I highly recommend reading this book to anyone. So I highly recommend to anyone who wants to learn the second Gemara, learning the second Avodah Zara. It's easy. It's got unbelievable stories, and you really appreciate the holiness of it. Speak Allah, Maseches Avodah Zara. Maseches Avodah Zara, Alan. Datach Allah, Maseches Avodah Zara, Datach Alan. L'shem Minach, Maseches Avodah Zara, L'shem Minach. Lo b'ama hadayin, lo b'ama ta'asay. Yosem Masechet Haim, Hem Halem Shinu. Sefer Ba, Emunircha, Olam Hashem. Yisrael, Imanu, Olam Haba, Amin Ba, Papa, Ami Ba, Papa, Nachma Ba, Papa, Chaim Ba, Papa, Abba Mari Ba, Papa, Rav Ba, Papa, Ratisha Ba, Papa, Shorcha Ba, Papa, Ada Ba, Papa, Zara Ba, Papa. However, no, Adonai, Henu, Esrei, Henu, Yosef, Papa, Nia, Anakam says, Kulanu, Anakam says, Henu, Eight, Henu, Hey, Papa, Lani Nation, some days you're a different spot, and the way to Patnano, Secha, you will Lee, Hihili beats, I mean, the Kukecha. Man lo evos lo eskach mikudecha kano atarnei latenu kudecha amen shela bered not even nachnu necha vayol midrash below chapter 14 years to remember channel in the hymns animal must be the verse the hymn is referring to the tale of animal native the hymn native animal native the cabinet circle the hymn native the animal cabinet other words in the hymn words in other words in the fire about then words in their shachas nema Elohim so then their shachas and she done in your law you can see there and he's got Marish oh here we go here's the James Sartani was saying, Gate as in the film, the storm of Haman, or you say him, film of the woman was full of certain just call it on the Iba, Moradim, the Yammer Leo Zara, close the much of the Torah, there was a read out of London, the same beat. Lechacha, Tancha Ozak, the Shach, Shua Lecha, Rakitzosa, he says he's Lecha. He will Lecha, the Siva, the Bash, Ayim, Hurach, Nina, before Osha, the Flight, he's going to shmir Amen. Jump. About 8. Jump. There you go. Amen. I didn't